Lewis, the undefeated powerhouse of American karate. The other, Chuck Norris, a quiet but relentless technician with everything to prove. What followed wasn't just a match. It was a savage fight that's itself. When the dust settled, karate in America would never be the same. This was the moment it changed forever. The stage was set, America's karate boom. By the mid-1960s, karate was erupting into the American mainstream. Once seen as an obscure Eastern discipline, the martial art was gaining traction through military exposure, Hollywood fascination, and the growing interest in Eastern philosophy. But it wasn't philosophy that drew crowds. It was fighting, and tournaments quickly became battlegrounds for the best martial artists in the country. The American tournament scene was dominated by aggressive, full-contact bouts. These weren't ceremonial katas or stage demonstrations. They were real fights with real consequences. Fighters trained hard, competed harder, and built reputations through grit and skill. In this atmosphere, Joe Louis emerged as the face of American karate, a former Marine, explosive athlete, and virtually unstoppable force in competition. At the same time, Chuck Norris was quietly climbing the ranks. Known for his calm demeanor and clean technique, Norris wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but he was consistent. He trained obsessively in Korean Tang Soo Do, honed his timing with surgical precision, and began making waves by defeating respected names in the circuit. While Louis racked up titles and headlines, schools were expanding, and competitors were starting to push past the traditional boundaries of the art. Tournament karate was no longer a mirror of its Eastern roots. It was becoming something uniquely American. And right at the tipping point, in the summer of 1967, the All-American Karate Championship at Madison Square Garden was announced. It was more than just another tournament, it was a proving ground. Everyone knew the real story wasn't the event itself, it was the potential showdown between Chuck Norris and Joe Louis. One man represented power, dominance, and the old guard. The other represented speed, precision, and something new. No one knew it yet, but this fight, this singular confrontation, would become the moment karate as America knew it would change forever. Joe Louis, the golden boy of American karate. By 1967, Joe Louis wasn't just another fighter, he was the fighter. The name struck immediate recognition in martial arts circles, and for good reason. A former Marine with a physique more suited to boxing than point karate, Louis brought raw power and unmatched aggression into a sport still finding its identity in the United States. In many ways, he was its first true American-born superstar. Louis began training in Okinawa during his military service in the early 1960s, studying Shorin-ryu karate under some of the most respected Okinawan masters. But unlike many traditionalists, Louis didn't leave the art in its classical form. He wanted to fight. He wanted to test techniques under real pressure, with real contact. Upon returning to the US, he entered karate tournaments with a mindset that was entirely different from the norm: fast, direct, explosive, and it worked. Joe Louis exploded onto the scene, winning virtually every tournament he entered. His presence was intimidating. At 6 feet 0 inches and weighing over 195 pounds of muscle, he moved like a middleweight, but hit like a heavyweight. His specialty was overwhelming opponents with powerful blitzes and precise strikes. While other fighters used wide, traditional stances and conservative tactics, Louis closed the distance fast and hit even faster. At a time when American karate was still trying to define its competitive structure, Louis was forcing a definition through sheer dominance. He won the first U.S. Nationals in 1966, took multiple regional titles, and held an undefeated record that seemed almost untouchable. But what really set him apart wasn't just his power or his results, it was his aura. Joe Louis represented American martial arts confidence. He gave interviews, he predicted outcomes. He had a swagger that matched his skill. To many, he was not only the best, he was the future of karate itself. Critics may have whispered about the rough edges of his style or his disdain for strict tradition, but fans loved him. Students emulated him. Schools taught like him. In just a few years, Joe Louis had helped evolve karate into a faster, more dynamic sport, and by doing so, helped build a national audience for what was once considered a niche hobby. In 1967, Lewis entered the All-American Karate Championship at Madison Square Garden as the heavy favorite. Nobody expected him to lose. If anything, the crowd wanted to see just how many opponents he could dismantle on his way to another title. What they didn't expect was a savage fight that would shake that reputation to its core. Standing in the opposite corner was Chuck Norris, a man who had studied every move Lewis had ever made, and who had waited patiently for this exact moment. Chuck Norris's climb to the top. In 1967, Chuck Norris was not the action hero the world would come to know. What he was, undeniably, was a disciplined fighter on a steep upward climb through the American karate ranks. While Joe Louis was the explosive star everyone watched, Chuck Norris was the technician everyone underestimated. Norris's journey began years earlier, during his service in the U.S. Air Force, where he was stationed in South Korea. It was there he encountered Tang Soo Do, a Korean martial art with powerful strikes and rigorous discipline. Norris trained obsessively, earning black belts in Tang Soo Do and later in other styles, including Shido Ryu and Taekwondo. Unlike Lewis, Norris didn't rely on sheer physicality. He built his style around timing, precision, and adaptability. By the mid-1960s, Norris was already winning regional tournaments, but his name didn't carry the same media weight as Lewis. Norris wasn't brash or flamboyant. He didn't talk trash or predict knockouts. He let his fighting speak. Every victory was another step forward. Every opponent was another problem to solve. His approach was methodical. Norris studied footage of his competitors, broke down their habits, and trained to exploit their weaknesses. He practiced relentlessly, often isolating specific techniques and repeating them thousands of times until they became second nature. His attention to detail and his tireless work ethic made him a dangerous opponent, especially against fighters who underestimated him. Outside the ring, Norris was quietly expanding his influence. He opened a chain of karate schools across California, attracting both serious students and Hollywood celebrities. His roster of students would eventually include Steve McQueen, Bob Barker, and Donnie and Marie Osmond. But at the time, Norris was still just a fighter with something to prove, hungry, technical, and fiercely determined. In 1967, he entered two major tournaments that would define his competitive legacy. First, he won the Karate Tournament of Champions, defeating 7 skilled fighters in a single event. Then came the big one, S. Henry Cho's All-American Karate Championship, held at Madison Square Garden, the most prestigious venue in the country, and the tournament where Joe Louis was expected to dominate once again. But Norris was ready. He'd been preparing not just for the tournament, but for Joe Louis specifically. Norris saw the flaws in Louis's aggression, the openings left when he lunged in, the timing gaps between his combinations. Norris had a plan and the skill to execute it. He advanced through the bracket methodically, defeating every opponent in front of him with efficiency. While others focused on the spectacle, Norris focused on the goal: to reach and beat Joe Louis. Few believed he could do it. Fewer believed what would happen next. The All-American Karate Championship. Madison Square Garden, 1967. The All-American Karate Championship, held on June 24, 1967, was unlike any tournament that had come before it. Hosted by Grandmaster S. Henry Cho at Madison Square Garden, the event brought national visibility to karate in a way that had never been achieved. It was a milestone for martial arts in America, and it was the stage set for a confrontation that would mark a turning point. The venue itself added weight. Madison Square Garden was known for boxing, basketball, and concerts, but not martial arts. That changed in 1967. With hundreds of fighters from across the country in attendance and thousands of spectators filling the seats, the energy was electric. Most attendees expected Louis to walk through the bracket. He was bigger, stronger, and had an undefeated aura. Norris, while respected, wasn't yet considered in the same tier by casual observers. But those paying attention, especially other fighters, knew this matchup had the potential to shift everything. The tournament followed a single elimination format. Points were scored through clean, decisive strikes judged by a panel. Unlike full-contact knockouts, the format required precision, control, and tactical mastery. Fighters needed to hit hard, but within control. while staying defensively sharp and reading their opponent's rhythm. Lewis advanced as expected, dispatching his opponents with speed and dominance. He overwhelmed fighters with blitzes and low kicks, staying aggressive and always pushing forward. But something was different. His victories weren't as effortless as usual. Competitors had started adjusting. They knew Lewis's style, and while few could counter it, the gap was shrinking. Norris, on the other hand, cut through his side of the bracket with surgical precision. He used timing and footwork to neutralize faster opponents, and he conserved energy throughout. His strikes weren't always flashy, but they were clean. He was fighting for legitimacy, respect, and the chance to prove he could beat the best. And that put him in a unique position. By the end of the day, it was clear. The final would be Chuck Norris versus Joe Louis. The crowd knew they were about to witness something different. This was the collision of two schools of thought, something different from what anyone had seen before. Power versus precision, aggression versus strategy, old champion versus rising threat. The mats were cleared, the judges took their places, the air was still. Then, the bell rang, and the savage fight began. Chuck Norris's savage fight with Joe Louis. When the final match of the 1967 All-American Karate Championship began, most spectators still believed Joe Louis would walk away with another title. But Chuck Norris had studied him too well. What unfolded was not a cautious technical match. It was a savage fight that shocked everyone watching and, in its intensity, rewrote the future of competitive karate. The first exchange was a test of nerves. Louis advanced quickly, using his signature aggressive style. He charged, but Norris kept answering back, scoring with precision kicks and high-speed counters. Judges struggled to keep up. Norris's ability to disguise his attacks, especially his front leg roundhouse and back fist combo, began to wear Louis down. The final exchange was brutal. Louis lunged, aiming to knock Norris off his base. Norris parried, pivoted inside, and delivered a lightning-fast punch to Louis, followed by a controlled hook kick, stopping just short of full contact but scoring cleanly. The bell rang. Then the announcer declared the winner, Chuck Norris. It wasn't just a win, it was a seismic upset. Louis, the undefeated champion, had been outscored and outmaneuvered. Norris had fought hard and smart, turning every strength Louis had into a weakness. This strategic shift elevated the overall level of competition. Fighters were no longer just martial artists, they were tacticians. 3. Legitimizing karate as a national sport. The Norris-Louis match took place in Madison Square Garden, under bright lights and in front of a large audience. It proved that karate could be more than a niche activity. It could be a spectator sport. The intensity and drama of the fight helped capture mainstream interest. This bout gave karate an identity. A serious, technical, and competitive martial art deserving of national attention. More events followed, and public interest surged. 4. Inspiring a generation. For many young martial artists watching or hearing about that fight, it became a defining moment. Chuck Norris's disciplined approach, combined with his calm under pressure, inspired a generation of fighters. He proved that success didn't require flamboyance or aggression, just preparation and execution. His victory also opened doors beyond the dojo. Within a few years, Norris would transition into acting, bringing martial arts to the big screen and fueling a pop culture movement around karate in the 1970s and 1980s. The impact of that fight still lingers in how karate is taught, how it's fought, and how it's viewed. Legacy: Norris-Louis and the new era of karate. The 1967 savage fight between Chuck Norris and Joe Louis became the dividing line between two eras of American karate, before and after. The legacy it left behind shaped not only the careers of both men, but also the direction of martial arts for decades to come. Chuck Norris, following his win, became the face of technical, disciplined karate in America. His victory gave him credibility in both the martial arts and entertainment industries. By the early 1970s, Norris had expanded his karate schools, continued to dominate in competition, and attracted celebrity students like Steve McQueen, who would later help launch his acting career. Norris used his platform to elevate karate's visibility across media and culture. But his influence went beyond the screen. Norris's emphasis on precision, strategy, and respect helped define the core philosophy of modern karate. He showed that a fighter didn't need to be the loudest or the strongest, just the most prepared. In doing so, he became an icon not for flash, but for focus. Joe Louis, despite the defeat, remained a towering figure. Rather than fading, he evolved. He later became one of the founding fathers of American kickboxing and continued to innovate within martial arts, eventually being named the greatest karate fighter of all time by Karate Illustrated in 1983. His rivalry with Norris sharpened him and expanded his own thinking about what it meant to be a fighter. Together, Norris and Louis pushed each other and the